the first thing I want to look at, this is from section 2.4. This is complex numbers. What is in between the two parentheses? A negative. That's a minus sign, guys. That does not mean to multiply these two things together. This means to multiply, right? How the parentheses are stuck together. So make sure you understand that. If I'm going to solve this problem, what's the first thing I have to do? Distribute the negative. So when I do that, this becomes 11 minus 2i, what? Plus 3 minus 6i. Real goes with real, imaginary goes with imaginary. On your quiz, it says to write your answer in standard form. When I have complex numbers, what does that mean?
The real numbers go first.
Good. Real number goes first, imaginary second. How do you know something's imaginary? Has the I with it. So what is 11 plus 3? 14. And then what's negative 2 and negative 6i? Minus 8i. That's it. If I look at number 2, what are they asking me to do to these two parentheses? Add them. So you just have the real with the real, which 7 plus 3 is 10. And then the imaginary. What's 6i and 12i? Plus 18i. Anybody have questions on those two? All right, so if I go over here, what do they ask me to do? Multiply. In this case, guys, you need to remember that I times I is I squared, which equals negative 1. So if I multiply, 6 times 2 is 12, thank you. 6 times negative 3i, negative 18i, negative 2i times 2, negative 4i, and negative 2i times negative 3i, plus 6i squared. As soon as I see I squared, cross this off and change the sign in front. Because if I have a positive 6 and I multiply by negative 1, that's where I get my negative 6. So now you have two real parts, 12 and negative 6, which is 6. And then your two imaginary parts, negative 18 and negative 4. Negative 22i. These questions are super easy, but they're super easy to make mistakes on. If you forget that I times I is I squared, or if you don't add, subtract, or multiply correctly, this could get you guys, these are ones that I think are easy, so you should, just make sure you take your time and get your signs right. Same thing here, we're doing what? Multiplying, FOIL. So 1 times 3 is 1 times negative 2i. I times 3, so positive 3i. And then what's I times negative 2i? Negative 2i squared. I see I squared, what do? Cross it off and then change the sign. So what are my real parts? 3 plus 2 is 5. And then a negative 2i and a positive 3i. Plus I. Is it okay if I put a 1 in front of the I? Yeah, that's fine. You won't usually see it written that way, but if it makes you feel better, then do that. No worries.
Isn't it 5? 3 plus 2.
Negative 2 plus 3. The sign in front goes with it.
Wasn't it negative 2 and then you multiply by negative 1?
That was at the end. I times negative 2i. Yeah. That's okay. You don't have to apologize. All right, guys. You're going to have a division problem. All that the division problem is a long multiplication problem. I cannot have I in the denominator. So what do I have to multiply the denominator by? What is it? The conjugate. What does the conjugate mean?
Opposite sign.
Opposite sign where? In the middle. So if I multiply the bottom by 4 plus 3i, what do I do to the top? Same thing. Guys, if you forget and you don't do the conjugate, you should be able to check your mistake, because once I multiply the top and bottom by the conjugate, your denominator should become one whole real number. If I didn't multiply by the conjugate, I left the sign the same, when you multiply it all out, you'll still have i's. So you need to go back and check it. But let's just multiply the top. Let's just FOIL the top and get something here. So 3 times 4 is, oh, thank you. 3 times 3i plus 9i. What's 2i times 4? And then what's 2i times 3i? Plus 6i squared. As soon as I see I squared, what do? Cross it off, and then what do we do to the sign? Change it. So if I simplify this, my real parts are 12 and negative 6. This should always happen. Always, always, always. You should have reals on the ends and i's in the middle. So what's 12 minus 6? 6. And then what's 9i and 8i? 17i. Okay? We simplify the numerator. Now let's do the same thing in the denominator. What is 4 times 4? 16. What's 4 times positive 3i? Okay. What's negative 3i times 4? Negative 12i. Then what's negative 3i and a positive 3i? What kind? Negative 9i squared. As soon as I see that I squared, I cross it off and do what? Change the sign. So now I have real parts. 16 plus 9. Okay. What happens with a positive 12i and a negative 12i? They cancel. Am I left with a whole real number in the denominator? Yes. Because what you're doing is multiplying right here. Guys, this is just difference of perfect squares. When we multiply difference of perfect squares, the middle terms cancel. The last thing you need to do is just make sure that you can't simplify.
So when you're dividing them, what you do is the denominator switch the sign.
In the middle. Just multiply by the conjugate, and then it just becomes too big multiplication.
And it becomes the opposite sign.
In the middle, yeah. So that's it right there. 6 plus 17i divided by 25. If you could simplify, meaning if this was 24, can 6 and 24 simplify? Yes, you would. But it doesn't, so you're good to go. All right, the next one, same exact kind of problem. We're dividing. So what am I going to multiply the numerator and denominator by?
2 minus 3.
Perfect. 2 minus 3i. What you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So it just becomes two big multiplication problems. What is 7 times 2? 7 times negative 3i. Just make sure you got your signs right. What's 1 times 2? So 2i, and then I times negative 3i. Good. As soon as I see I squared I, cross it off and change the sign. So I have 14 plus 3. And then negative 21i and positive 2i. Good. Same thing on the bottom. What should happen on the bottom when I FOIL this out? Good. Middle term will cancel out. So I have 2 times 2 is 2 times negative 3i. 3i times 2. Yep. And then negative 3i, positive 3i. Negative 9i squared. I see I squared and do what? Good. So I have 4 and 9, which is? And then what happens with negative and positive 6i? Good. Guys, that will happen every time if you multiply by the denominator's conjugate. If you work something out and you get i's in the denominator, you need to look back and say, did I multiply by the conjugate? All right, does anybody have any questions on that? You're going to have 1 multiplying on the quiz, and you'll have 1 dividing. You need to look at that. All right, then I come here. You'll have one of these, and it's going to say, find all the zeros. How do you find the zeros of anything? What's the process you have to use? You got to factor. Okay, I'll go over some of the questions that are on your extra practice. I'm not going to give you any numbers that are ginormous, like 60 on your extra practice. All right, so you just got frustrated with that one and just didn't do it. But the process is what I need to know that you guys know how to do. How do I factor this? It doesn't group. There's no GCF. Like, what do I do? Synthetic division. I look at the last number, so I have 24. What are the factors of 24? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, 24. And it's all plus or minus, right? Again, there's a bunch of different ways you can do this. How many zeros am I going to come up with? 3. So of all these numbers, 3 of them work. You do not have to start at 1 and then try negative 1 and then 2. You guys can do what you want. Last period, I started at negative 4. I don't know why he chose negative 4, but he did. And it worked. So it was super easy to just figure out everything else. But if I were you, I would not skip around. I wouldn't try 2, then -6, then +12. Then you might just get yourself confused. So I'm going to start with 1. And you can use your brains a little bit. Let's start with +1. So I have 1, 5, -2, -24. Right? So bring down the 1. What's 1 times 1? So 5 plus 1 is 6 times 1 is 6. -2 and 6 is 4 times 1 is this going to work? No. Is it likely that -1 is going to work? No, I didn't get anywhere close to 24, so let's just try 2. So 1, 5, -2, -24. Bring down the 1. What's 2 times? Bring down the 1. I wrote it 2. That's a very common mistake, guys. Some of you did it on your test, so make sure you pay attention to that. What's 1 times 2? 5 plus 2 is? 7 times 2 is? -2 and 14. What's 12 times 2? Does this one work? Okay, so you found out that one of the zeros is x equals 2. How many more are left over? There's 2, right? So write your resulting polynomial. What is this? Perfect. X squared plus 7x plus 12 equals 0. Now you could do synthetic division again. Factors of 12, 1, 2, 4, 6, 12. Or look to see if you can factor. Is there a GCF?
Yes.
No.
X plus 4.
But is there a GCF?
No.
Get in the habit of asking yourself that question.
Oh, the GCF.
GCF, what they all have in common? No. But, Stefan, are there factors of 12 that multiply, God bless you, that multiply to give you 12 but add to give you 7? 4 and 3. Positive?
Yeah.
There you go. So what are my other x's? Perfect. On your quiz, I'm not testing to know if you know how to do synthetic division. So I'm not going to give you one where you have to synthetically divide 100 times. What you should do is synthetically divide until you find a factor. 90% of the time, what is left over will factor either by grouping, trinomials, whatever. Christian. Okay. Yes, sir.
If that is a factor, do you use the formula?
Say it again.
If that is a factor, you use the formula?
Yes, but I'm not going to do that. All right.
Can we just write like x equals 93x plus 4? Can we just do like x equals 93 comma?
That's fine. I didn't put a line on the quiz. I just wrote in the answer. Circle your answer. I'll find it.
Okay.
You guys sometimes get hung up on where to write them. All right, this one can get some of you confused. Now, I told you there was a shortcut. I'm going to show you how to do the shortcut now. I'll use it again in the next problem. It's in the practice work, so I'll show you it there. But guys, do not get hung up. If you don't understand the shortcut that I show you, don't worry about it. But if I write these zeros out, this is x equals -7, x equals 2 plus 3i, and since it's a complex number, what else do I have to account for? 2 minus 3i, the conjugate. So I have 3 x's. That means I have how many, what should my polynomial start with? X to the what? Right, x cubed. So we're going to work backwards. We're going to take this and turn it into the polynomial that you would have begun with. So when I rewrite this, I have to put it in my parentheses. When I move this over, what does this parenthesis look like? Okay, x plus 7. When I take this whole thing and move it over, what does it look like? X minus, and then I have 2 plus 3i, right? When I take this whole thing and move it over, this becomes x minus 2 minus 3i. Now, some of you want to go ahead and distribute the negative before, whatever. It's up to you. I don't think that's the best idea, but it's fine. Leave your real number out here. Just leave it. You'll multiply it in a second. But what this works out to be is x minus 2 minus 3i. Agreed? And this one works out to be x minus 2 plus 3i. Agreed? Okay, this is the shortcut. And again, if you don't get it or you don't whatever, but do you notice that in the beginning of each parenthesis, I have the same thing, right? At the end of each parenthesis, I have the same thing, yes? And then what do you notice about the signs? They're different. Guys, this is the same thing as difference of perfect squares. If I had 9x plus 4, and 9x minus 4. What would happen when I FOIL that out? What happens to the middle terms?
Cancel.
They cancel out. Okay, the same thing will happen here. Again, you still have your x plus 7. We'll just write it out here. But I'm going to rewrite this as the first term is x minus 2, and I have 2 of them. Then what's the second term? Just the term. Don't worry about a sign. 3i. And how many do I have?
2.
Okay. And then when we have difference of perfect squares, what does the middle sign look like?
Negative.
It's a negative. This will work every single time. If you guys don't get it, you don't see it, whatever, just multiply out the whole thing. X times x times negative 2, x times 3i, negative 2 times x, negative 2 times negative 2, the whole thing. But when you work this out, you still have your x plus 7 out here. We'll leave it alone. Think about this. If I distribute, because this goes to both, right? Yes? What's 3 squared? 9. And what's I times I? I squared, right? So I would cross this out and change this sign, correct? Okay, Christian question.
So like if the terms are the same but the middle sign is different,
You can do the difference of perfect squares. It'll be the same way every time. This will always work. So then I have to do this, x minus 2 times x minus 2. Well, think about that. What's x times x? X squared. What's x times negative 2? What's negative 2 times x? And what's negative 2 and negative 2? And then I have plus what? That eliminates the whole multiplying where you get 3xi, negative 3xi, that sort of thing. Again, if you don't understand that, and I'll do another one that has this, if you don't get that, then just from this point here, just distribute, 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 and combine like terms. You'll get the same answer, it just takes a little longer. I'll multiply it out here in a second and show you. But when yes? What I do now is I say, okay, I have x plus 7 still, times x squared, what? Minus 4x plus 13. And now we can just distribute. What's x times x squared? X cubed. What's x times negative 4x? Yep. What's x times 13? Now what's 7 times x squared? And then I have 7 times negative 4x. And then 7 times 13. And what can I combine? So I have x cubed, then what? Plus 3x squared minus 15x plus 81. And what should all of this be set equal to? Either 0 or f of x. If you do not put either equals 0 or f of x, I'm going to take a point or two off. I'll do another one with the shortcut. I'll show you some where the extra practice has the shortcut. But if you guys, yeah.
The 7 times 13 is 91.
Oh, thank you. 91. If you didn't get the shortcut, if it's just like, I just don't understand it, that's fine. You can do this. X minus 2 minus 3i times x minus 2 plus 3i. Is this going to take a little bit longer? Yes. Does it get a little messy? Yes, but that's okay. What's x times x? What's x times negative 2? What's x times 3i? 3xi. What's negative 2 times x? What's negative 2 times negative 2? Plus 4. And then what's negative 2 plus times 3i? What's negative 3 times x? What's negative 3i times negative 2? And then what's negative 3i and a positive 3i? I see I squared. What do I do? So now if we simplify, I have x squared. Negative 2x and negative 2x gives me what? Negative 4x. What's positive 3xi and a negative 3xi? Cancels out. What's negative 6i and a positive 6i? Cancels out. So I'm left with 4 plus 9, which is that the same thing we got over here? X squared minus 4x plus 13. Right? It'll work the same way. The shortcut to me is just a little easier, but if you don't get it, some people, you just never wrap your head around it. That's fine. Don't do it. But I just think it's a little easier. All right. You'll have one of these on your test. One of these. It's going to say, find all the given zeros. I'm going to give you one, which in turn will give you two. Because if one of my solutions is x equals 3 plus 2i, I know another solution is x equals 3 minus 2i, okay? So two of your solutions are imaginary, and then you're going to find the real one. I told you guys on Monday when we did a couple of these problems that when you do this, you will always, your long division will always work out evenly. You will not have a remainder. If you have a remainder, you did something wrong. So the first thing we need to do is multiply these two together. So I'm going to move this over here and this over here. This becomes x minus 3 plus 2i, right? And x minus 3 minus 2i. So if I distribute the negative, this is x minus 3 minus 2i, x minus 3 plus 2i. Questions? Now, do you guys see the shortcut?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you see as the first term? X minus 3, and how many of them do you have? So squared. Then the second term, I have what? 2i, and I got 2 of them, so I square. And then since it's the difference of perfect squares, what goes in the middle? A minus sign. I would simplify the back part first, because this 2 goes to both terms. So 2 squared is, and I squared is, okay, so then I squared becomes, you just flip it. And then over here, this is real simple. You guys know how to FOIL. What's x times x? What's x times negative 3x? What's negative 3 times x? And negative 3 and negative 3 is? And then what do I have left over here? The plus 4. So simplify. X squared minus 6x plus 13. If you didn't see the shortcut at this point right here, you can just distribute, distribute, distribute. Distribute, 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 distribute. Takes a little longer, can get a little messy, but you're fine. Christian. Say it one more time. Here, it was negative, but it's negative 4i squared. So this is negative 1. So a negative 1 times negative 4 just changes the sign to positive. So now that you've found the polynomial that you're going to use as your divisor, you put it out here. It's x squared. What was it? Minus 6x plus 13? And that's going to go into x cubed minus 11x squared plus 43x minus 65. This is a short, long division problem. I know it seems long, but it's not. I'm going to say x squared into x cubed. So x squared times what gives me x cubed? X squared times what gives me x cubed? X. So I know it's x. Where am I going to put it? Above what? 43x. Good. Get your subtraction ready so you don't even have to think. What is x times x squared? X cubed. What is x times negative 6x? Good. X times 13. Before I subtract, what do? Distribute, distribute, distribute. So what's 43x minus 13x? Everybody? 30x, okay. Negative x squared plus 6x squared. Negative 11x plus 6x squared. Negative 5x squared. What happens with my x cubes? Cancel out. What do I do with negative 65? And we do the same thing all over again. First term into first term. X squared times what gives me negative 5x squared? Negative 5. Now get your subtraction ready. What's negative 5 times x squared? What's negative 5 times negative 6? What is it? Positive 30x. And then what's negative 5 times 13? What do you think it might be? There you go. So it's negative 65. Before you subtract, distribute, 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 distribute. What's negative 65 and a positive 65? 0. What's negative and positive 30x? What's negative and positive 5x squared? So here is where your final 0 is. How do you solve to get the 0? So x equals 5. That will work out every single time. You'll always come up with like 2x minus 1 or x plus 3, something like that. Yeah.
So if you know that there's two imaginaries and one real, couldn't you just do synthetic and find the one real?
You could, but the skill that you're learning here is to combine the two and use...
Okay.
Because if you did synthetic division, try and work it out. I mean, you got to do the factors of 65.
I plugged in 5 as my first one.
So you know what? That's a good way to check. You can do it that way.
Okay.
That's a good way to check. Did everybody hear what Franco just said? That's a good way to check, but you have to use long division in this one because that's the skill that we're learning right now. Yes, ma'am. To over the here? Right there. This one should be a give me. It tells you to solve using what? The quadratic formula. So what do you need to know? The quadratic formula. Guys, give me a couple more minutes, please. All right, while we're doing this, guys, make sure that your quadratic is set up in the form of x squared, x constant equals 0. If you have anything to the right side, you need to move it over because you have to have everything on the same side to identify your A, B, and C. So now that we see that that is, I have A equals 5, B equals 4, and C equals 2. All right, so let's plug this in our formula. I have negative what?
4.
Okay, so negative 4 plus minus the square root of 4 squared minus, which is, all right, all over. Perfect. If I were you, I would put whatever the B term is, positive or negative, just put it in parentheses. An easy mistake is if that's a negative number and you said negative 16 and just left it. Just don't do that. All right, let's just simplify a little bit. You can simplify more if you want to. I'm just going to take my time, show you guys every step. What is 4 squared? 16. Then what's negative 4 times 5 times 2? Negative 40. All over what? 10, right? So now I have negative 4 plus or minus. What's 16 minus 40? Negative 24 over 10. All right, I see a problem. What's the problem? The negative. So watch. I'm going to write it like this. You don't have to, but this is what I'm going to do. Plus, minus. I'm going to put that negative 1 there. So I remember that square root of negative 1 is I. Good. Then can you guys break down 24?
Yeah.
What perfect and non-perfect square? 6 and 4. Good. So at this point, guys, this is the part that's the easiest, but the part where most mistakes are made. What is the square root of negative 1, you said? I. What's the square root of 4? You notice how I took those out of the radicals. So this really becomes negative 4 plus minus 2I root 6 over 10. If you stop here, you're going to get points taken off because it's not done. If you can look and say, okay, 2 goes into 4, 10, and 2, that's great. Some of you won't see that. You need to separate it like this, which is perfectly fine. You do not have to. But if you see it better here, that's fine. What can I simplify negative 4/10 to? Negative 2/5. Plus minus what?
I root 6 over 5.
So there's your answer. Can I write that over one denominator?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's the same. Either one of these is perfectly fine. Either or. But make sure that you simplify at this point. It's important. Yeah.
If like the B would simplify but not like the number in front of the I, can you still do it?
Okay, good question. Say it was negative 4 plus minus 3I root 6 over 10. All right, that's what Michael's asking. Do you see how only the first term and the 10 simplify? So you would have to write it separately in order for it to be completely simplified. You'd have to write it separately, and it would be negative 2/5 plus or minus 3I root 6 over 10. If that happens, obviously that's not the answer, so don't come to me like, you had the wrong answer. That's not. This is just a hypothetical situation. That's why I say sometimes it's just easier to separate them and then put them back together if you want to, but just so you make sure that you get all the simplifying done. Sure. And there's going to be one quadratic. So make sure you guys look over this. That's why I gave you that extra practice yesterday. I'm going to look at it 1 second and then I'll be done. But this is not a tough quiz. I really think there's only 2 questions that could really give you some problems if you're not paying attention. The other stuff, if you're not paying attention, then it's not going to be great. But I think you'll be okay.